In a few moments, you will have an experience which will seem completely real. It will be the result of your subconscious fears transformed to your conscious awareness. You have 5 seconds to terminate this tape. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's going on, everybody? How's it hanging? How's it hanging? Yes, I'm back from vacation. Thanks for joining us for another We Are So Back Wednesday, BGcast Wednesday live podcast. Man, I got to tell you guys, I had a very interesting vacation. As you can see, I got a haircut. I'm hella tan. It was a great time. But there's an interesting story. Yes, I agree with you. Nice to meet you, Michelle. Thanks for being here. I appreciate it. Yes, it is hard to come back from vacation. And of course, we got Mr. Don Rogers from March 4th Productions in the chat. As always, thanks for being here, man. But we're going to get into the experience tonight with my guest, what happened to me. It's very interesting, but nonetheless, I want to say thanks to I'm about to hit 400 on YouTube, which I wasn't even paying attention. Thanks for that, everybody, all the new subscribers on YouTube. And then I am about to hit 500 on Rumble. So this is really cool. I want to thank everybody for the coming over to the BGcast family, enjoying the ride here. Of course, here on BGcast, we learn together. Even though I've been on my spiritual evolution for, almost 18 years at this point, I still don't know it all. I still don't. So that's the one thing I'm going to say for sure. Thanks for joining us. The other things, thanks, Michelle. Much appreciated. Thanks. And thanks, Don. I appreciate it as well. The other thing I'm going to say is this. I mean, some of you might have seen me on X kind of air out a little bit here. Some of the things that are going on currently in the thank you, Kirsten. I appreciate it, man. I'm getting a lot of love tonight. Thank you. I posted earlier on X about people kind of falling for the Epstein paper thing that went on, and a lot of people are still putting trust and faith in this establishment and the U.S. government in particular, even though we have just gotten a massive sleight of hand on this. Now, you know me, I've kind of moved out of the conspiracies. I moved out of politics. I focus more on the spiritual. I focus more on the metaphysical at this point in this show. I think that's where this is all going to eventually head sooner or later. Don't get me wrong. There's no coincidence that, hi, Sarah, thanks for being here. There's no coincidence that every single conspiracy out there has some kind of connection to the esoteric and the occult. It's no coincidence. So, what I'm going to say here, guys, is we have to do better. We can't keep accepting this. We run this ship. We run this ship. Okay. We are the ones who are truly in control. And we just have to have that realization here. We just have to have that remembrance. So stop allowing yourself to keep continuously getting pulled under the bipartisan system, all of the mainstream conspiracies. Okay, there's something bigger at hand. You guys have heard me use the cake analogy on this show before. Yes, Michelle, for sure, definitely. Epstein during the raid, his lawyers. Yes, I heard that, and exactly. So sick of people swallowing the lies. And yeah, David, thanks for being here, man. Those who know understand why. So, we're in very interesting and unknown charted territory for this batch of humanity. But nonetheless, I'm done rambling. I want to bring my guest on. I've actually been really looking forward to this interview. You guys remember Kirsten Mustaine. She was on the show back in season 2. And she is actually a part of a podcast called the Metaphysical Phat. And you guys have heard me talk about the Metaphysical Phat podcast on here a couple times. And I told you guys to check them out and follow and subscribe. The link is in both the YouTube and the Rumble description. So she is one half of the Metaphysical Phat, and tonight I have the other half of the Metaphysical Phat, who's about to join me. She is an amazing person, one hell of a channeler, one hell of a psychic. Got to give her enough credit for that. She's picked out some things that I couldn't actually believe. But nonetheless, I'm really looking forward to having her on and picking her brain. Let's welcome to the BGcast stage for her very first time. We have Samantha Consciously of the Metaphysical Phat podcast. What is up, Sam?
Wow, an introduction. That was lovely. I feel all loved and welcomed. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's cool to have you on. And, this has been a long time coming. And I'm sure we're going to dive into some really great stuff tonight. But first, since it is your first time on the show, you can elaborate. What I find interesting about your awakening story is you actually come from the healthcare system. You were in the healthcare system before 2020 came to be, and this was actually if I'm correct, a big spark for you that kind of you and pushed you to where you are today. So let's talk about that burning bush moment, Sam. If you don't have to go deep into it, you don't have to go too hardcore into it. But yeah, let everybody know how you got to where you are today on the Metaphysical Phat podcast.
Oh my God, you need a few years, I think. It's been loads of twists and turns. I mean, the thing was, my mum was spiritualist. She was raised spiritualist, and my dad is actually an atheist, but he comes from like a really big Roman Catholic background. So the real hodgepodge of upbringing. We didn't really talk about the spiritualist side until my mum and dad got divorced. And off I went, and my grandma was a bit of a witch, really. She's into tarot cards and she's psychic and all the rest of it. So it kind of runs in the family. So I think it's a DNA thing as well. So while I wasn't spiritually awake like I am now, like in the new age, because it's not even new age really, but like a more expanded state, we'll say, I've always kind of had my toe in the water. So I've always seen spirit. I've had a plethora of odd and strange experiences. But I think what kind of happens is you get traumatized when you're younger, don't you? Especially when you're coming in here and I'm going to say star seed, but I don't really like that word. But, we're a bit more expanded. We've got a few extra bits going on with this DNA, we'll say. And we come in here and I think they know we're here. So they try and put us to sleep. They try and put us through the ringer, really. And all that stuff kind of happens and you go back to sleep, essentially. So I'd have the odd peak experience, which would just bring me back and go, oh, yeah. There's more to life than, drink, drink drugs and whatever else, I'm not going to lie. I had a pretty wild early 20s and like late teens. And that's kind of what I was just doing. But what that actually was, it was a form of numbing out. And I kind of gone off the path. But it did serve a purpose in the long run, because I think it primes you and it gives you the fertile growth, the medium to kind of get to know yourself. Because when you go into your darkest times, that's when you've really got to do that introspection, haven't you, really? I had my children, and that was kind of that. And I got settled in, I wouldn't call it domestic bliss, but I'd essentially gone from a bit of a wild child to like a mum, basically, because you completely switch. And I was just going through the motions. And then it got to like end of 2018, 2019. And I had this huge crisis moment in my life, and it was like a real dark night of the soul. And I was just like, what the fuck am I doing? And I don't even know where it came from. I was just like, there's something, and it was this burning like itch within me. And it was like somebody had lit a flame. And I was having all this weird stuff that was happening. So I was having like really vivid dreams. I was waking up and going, oh, I'm in a dream. And it wasn't, I just couldn't, it was so vivid. It felt so real that real life felt diminished almost. And that was the real point for me. I was like, there's something going on here. And I was just looking, and I was just scouring YouTube. And I came across Dolores Cannon, and she introduced me to some pretty crazy concepts, She really expanded my thinking. I was like, hey, there's lots of stuff going on. And up until that point, if somebody just said, there's a UFO, and there's aliens are real and all the rest of it, I'd come across people that told me, and I was like, all right, go on, off you pop, have some crazy juice. And off I went. But all this kind of stuff started to happen. And at the time I was trained to be a nurse. And I really wanted to help people, because I think that's what happens when you're a healer. You know, we try and find mainstream ways of just fitting into society and using our gifts, because it's a calling, basically. You want to help people. And then COVID happened. Well, I was going through all this like down like the soul, my relationship breakdown. My life basically went to shit. And there was like, there's something going on there. It's not right. And they started talking about the jibby jabby, and I was just like, there was just something in me. And I remember having this moment. I was in bed. I felt really unwell. I was like, oh my God, I've got COVID. It was like, I don't know, February, March or something, when it had all just come out. And I remember it was almost like my higher self had come in and was just like, you can choose not to go down this path, you know. And I'd been really ill for a couple of days, and I couldn't breathe, and I was getting worse and worse. And I had this realization, and I went, yeah, I can. I don't have to do this. Literally within 20 minutes, gone, completely gone. Psychosomatic. The all is mind, absolutely. I know Diana goes on about it all the time, but it's true. And ever since then, I was just like, this isn't right. There's some sort of spiritual warfare going here, and it just ruined my job, basically. I couldn't do it anymore. And that essentially kickstarted a series of events. So I got fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, because obviously when you're not in alignment with your purpose, it was almost like a call to, like a shamanic call, basically, an initiation, and you go into like the darkness, don't you? And you have these illnesses, so you can have like a mental illness, or you can have like some kind of psychosis. And this all was like a catalyst. So it was really like building. And then my big peak moment was I had a Kundalini awakening in 2022. And that just blew my mind wide open. So yeah, there was no going back after that.
I can completely imagine, speaking of Kundalini awakenings, let's kind of dive into that, because I think, a lot of people don't understand completely. Real quick, you have some love before we dive into that. Michelle said she loves your voice.
Oh,
she said you could enchant forest creatures. Her voice is like magical. And she said, I have fibromyalgia, autoimmune disease, a broken back, and I've healed from all that since my activation. What a blessing. That's really cool, Michelle. But,
awesome.
Kundalini awakenings, man, the intensity of them, and that's where, you and I first kind of like, kind of met up, and we kind of like first started talking because you were talking about your Kundalini awakening, and I chimed in and I was like, you need to start doing the Kundalini Kriyas. I was like, this is going to help you doing all this, because, and that's what I recommend to a lot of people who begin to have their if they didn't get their Kundalini awakening from the Kundalini Kriyas themselves, that's what I start to recommend to people, because what this does is it helps you start to integrate that. And but real quick, let's talk about your Kundalini awakening. Let's talk about how intense it was, because I think now, and this is kind of educational material for people too, because if somebody ever starts to begin to experience their Kundalini awakening, they can have an awareness of what's going on, instead of thinking like they're going absolutely batshit mad. Like, what is wrong? What is wrong with me? Why am I this emotional, hyper energetic wreck at this point in time? Let's hear about yours for like an educational purpose, and so people can kind of get an understanding.
Cool. Well, so just for a bit of context, I've always been able to feel energy, but I just didn't know it was, even from being a kid. And then what happened like 2020, 2021, I did a Reiki 1, because I was starting to get all this heat in my hands, and I was like, I'm going to just dive into this. And that kind of set me on the path. And I was doing a lot of meditation. So when you first wake up, you're like, I'm so disciplined. I'm going to do like 4 hours of meditation a day, and I'm going to get up and salutate whatever the sun and all the rest of that shit. So I was proper into that. And I think what's happened is I just primed my sort of body, basically, and my energy got bigger and bigger and bigger. And I was doing this kind of, so I was getting a lot of, so what can happen is when you start with Kundalini, you feel it in your heart a lot of the time. It's like a heat or a fluttering, and you get it in your back. And I was getting that a lot, and I'm like, oh, what is this? And it's like the activation of Anahata, isn't it, really, basically? And I wasn't aware. So I'd read about Kundalini, but I wasn't really aware of it. I went on a yogic path. I was all down like the shamanic path. It was like meditation and all that jazz. And then I did this, it was almost like a tantric meditation. where you breathe through the cosmic bit. I put my teeth back in. The microcosmic orbit. So you go down and then back up, and it's building your basically your creative life force energy. And it popped my sacral chakra open, and then it would just have this massive rise, popped out my head, and I was just like, what the fuck is going on? Wasn't expecting it at all. Complete accident. Ended up having like spiritual psychosis. I thought it was some sort of goddess woman. I actually believed it though for a couple of days. She was like, oh, I'm the goddess. Not just like I've got the goddess in me. I was like, I'd lost it. I really had. I was seeing stuff was materializing. My sofa was like disappearing, and I was like, where's the sofa gone? And it was crazy. I remember one night I'd gone to bed and my head was just popping out. So like what happens is you can have something called the cosmic egg, and it cracks and you get this massive flash of light in your pineal and it's breaking a seal essentially. And what was happening is because I was fighting it, I was kind of dissolving, so my head up to there, and I was freaking out. So I became one with the void just to my neck, which was a really strange experience. So I had full so like full awareness of my body up to my neck, and then I'm like, oh my god, I'm in the entirety of everything. And I was like trying to pull myself back into my body, so I was fighting it anyway, and it just kind of petered out. And that was when it really started, because your life goes to shit. You've literally opened all these energetic channels, and what I've found out, so you've got the two channels. I mean, you've got the Ajin, the Pingala, and they go like that, and then the Shima that goes straight up. So what happens is, if you've not done the work, like you're on about the Kriya Yoga and stuff, you're not balancing the masculine and feminine sides of your body. You're not there properly. If you've got any blocks or anything, it's gonna cause a slight deviation. So what then happens is you get all this heat. So for ages and ages afterwards, I was like, oh my god, I'm burning up, and it was horrible. You know, I felt like I was going through the menopause. It was it was absolutely terrible. So there's all these signs and symptoms, but what's happened is you've activated your body template then, and you're running all this energy, and your reality needs to catch up. And I subsequently went and read about this, because you look for all this information, and it's really difficult to get. And I think a lot of people do have accidental Kundalini rising in like places like the UK. Oh, obviously, if you're in the Middle East and you're doing like Kundalini yoga and you're clearing all your channels, it's going to be brilliant. It's what you want. But when it happens by accident, it completely wrecks your life. And I mean, it happens on purpose, because you've got to a point where you've been living a lie, basically. You've been stuck in the machine. And obviously, I've been on that path, and it was like, come on now, Sam. It's time you really stepped into your power. This isn't in alignment with you. And this is when all this kind of like fibromyalgia and everything got really, really bad. And this is what I'm kind of working to heal now, and I'm almost there. But do you know what I mean? So it was just a real shake up. So all the stuff falls, you don't feel like you're, I was going to work and I was just like, I can't do it anymore. You feel it inside you, you know. It was like, I can't physically be in the healthcare system anymore. And the stuff they were asking us to do, it was just so unaligned. And I think the fact that this all happened during like COVID, it was just like the rub I really needed to get out of there. But I think I had to do it because it gave me the other side. So they could see what was going on, you know? So I kind of had a panoramic view from all sides, like the spiritual side, being in the system, believing like I wanted to help people, being a healer, the shamanic initiation. It was just like a real hodgepodge.
I would completely agree. And no, it is, you know, and one of the reasons, and you kind of even nailed it there, you know, when we have that when somebody has an accidental Kundalini awakening and the life goes to shit, really what's happening is it's clearing away all of the old life. It's, you know, and especially if we have that attachment to that dysfunction, we have that attachment to that toxicity that we were experiencing and that we were living in before, you know, that's what makes it seem world wrecking, you know, and a lot of us on our spiritual evolution, you know, even before we awoken and we went towards and we cultivated the bridge to the, ooh, my headphone fell out. Look at that. The bridge. Oh, sorry about that. Anyways, my technology is acting weird, but anyways, no, when you end up, you know, living in that dysfunction, and you end up growing that attachment to it, it really shows you that during the whole process. And and I did say something in here from Michelle. She said, I heard you start shaking sometimes from it. And absolutely, you do. You will start shaking. You will almost feel like you have these tremors almost. And kind of what Sam was saying too, and really where that shaking originates from is you haven't balanced your masculine and feminine energies, your Pingala Nadi and your Ingala Nadi, and then also to the Shushma Nadi as well, where it goes down the center. You haven't balanced that quite yet. So that's really good that you kind of brought that up, Sam, because, if you are having an accidental Kundalini awakening, or if you feel like you are, and I'm just kind of talking with everybody about it right now, who might be listening, who might be watching to this, start doing the Kundalini Kriyas. That's the best thing and the best advice I can recommend to you, because you're going to integrate that. You're going to get a basis of an understanding of where this energy is coming from, how it works in your body. Kirsten, yes, the destroyer is the creator. Indeed. 100%. And you're going to start to integrate and utilize that energy into your somatic being, your fascia, all of that too. And with that, you're going to actually release this stored trauma that the Kundalini is trying to go through, because that's honestly where I think a lot of the shaking comes from. Is the Kundalini is going through your body, it's working through your subtle body system. And because you haven't been opening your fascia and you haven't been working with that, it's like trying to drive out this trauma, all of this stuff. And that's why you end up shaking. Did you ever experience any shaking, Sam, when you were undergoing it, or?
I'll be really honest, I ain't got a fucking clue. It was just gone. It was that. I've got very small flashes of what was going on. I think the big thing is as well, it's not even just the fascia, it's like your entire chakra system, isn't it? Because you've got many, many different layers to your energy bodies, and that's what the heat does. It's a purifying heat. It's purging you. And it gets really, really intense to the point, like sometimes like, oh my God, I am physically on fire. You feel like you're burning. And it's trying to burn away all the crap. And as it's doing that, this is why Kirsten was saying that the destroyer is the creation, because it's just a big cycle, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And it's just moving one state to another. And that's what you're doing. You're basically burning away the stuff that isn't in alignment with you. That's why your relationships can end. You can, lose jobs. You can have health emergencies. You can have all sorts of stuff that goes on. And it's forcing you to look at the stuff in your life that you need to change. And that is painful. And like you said before, it does come down to attachment, and we all do it. You'll get attached because we've got ego, haven't we? That's the problem. And I mean, that was another side effect of the Kundalini as well. When I did it and my mind went out, when you merge with universal consciousness, you get a taste of being the all and of being an individuated soul. And it's almost like it fractured my mind. So it split me open. And what happened is I became like one with this stream of universal consciousness and was getting all this information. I mean, I was pretty tapped in and a bit psychic anyway, but this was just like next level. And you'll find that you're really heightened for a really long time afterwards. It kind of settles down and you learn to manage it after that. But that's another side effect as well, which is why you can get a lot of the psychosis, because it's just the sheer amount of energy. Sorry, the sheer amount of energy that comes through. Coupled with obviously this fractured psyche, because you weren't ready for it, because you've got to consolidate what you thought you were to what you now know you are, what you're told you are by society. We talk about the societal mind, don't we, and the programming. And this is another thing that's blasted out. So you're like a clean slate. You're still able to function because you've still got a sense of self, but you don't have all the attachments in that moment because it's just wiped the slate clean. So you've got to then rebuild that.
I would 100% agree with everything you just said. It does. It goes through you, and it kind of gives you a third party unbiased look of yourself, and especially the having your ego reformatted to be able to handle the combination of the unity consciousness and the individualization. That's a an interesting task. It's not an easy task to get there. And, experiencing that firsthand, is going to be, if you're not 100% ready for it, it can wreck you. It can throw you into almost that spiritual psychosis. So, but I want to thank you for diving into that just for a little bit, because, you know, like I remember when we first met, and you know, we were chatting and you were talking about it. I was like, I eventually have to hear the story behind this. I have to, you know, because there's a lot of people who undergo this and they don't understand what's happening to them. And, you know, gaining that understanding. And that's why I think, honestly, we all need to put our heads together at this point. And, you know, we need to start writing a new spiritual book. We need to start. We honestly do, because, you know, and you've seen me go off on it a couple of times also, too. Like, yes, you know, like, I'm not saying there's no truth in the religions and spiritualities of old. I'm not saying there's not. There's definitely truth there. But is the whole truth there? No. Are these old ways going to really service us in this new age? And, you know, when I say new age, I'm, you know, not talking about the new age movement. I'm talking about the new age that we're going into right now, this very strange, unknown, and uncharted territory. So it's like, you know, are these old ways really going to service us in this new age? Because when we get here, you know, we're opening ourselves up. We are in the age of enlightenment. We are in the age of ascension, you know, and right now it seems like, you know, spirituality is being, not in a bad way, but in a great way, is being filtered down. So, you know, we talked about the term blue collar spirituality before as well. We've kind of you know, kind of bounced that off, but it's starting to filter down. This isn't some fundamentalist doctrine, you know, that we're getting caught up in the hyper logistics of. You know, we're not sitting there circumambulating our room like 33 times because we're trying to cultivate this energy. We have to circumambulate, like, you know, 33 times counterclockwise, because we can just cultivate energy. It's there. It's accessible to us. I mean, what do you think in your own words? Do you think that right now we should be looking towards a new way? I mean, yes, we can bring some of the aspects of the old with us, the things that are tried and true, things like Kriya Yoga. I think that kind of is upholding, you know, as we go forward too. And there's a couple of other things too. But I mean, what do you think in your own words, Sam? Do you think it's time that we burst forth, that we start exploring spirituality, and I guess you could say its most organic state, as opposed to trying to drag these old doctrines from the Piscean age with us into this new age? What are your thoughts about that?
I mean, that's a pretty big topic. So there's a few bits I think you've got to break that down into. We talk about religions, don't we? Which is something completely different to spiritual practice. And I think you've got to differentiate between that. Like, we talk about Kriya Yoga, we talk about the mudras, we talk about mantra, and these are all tried and tested methods. I mean, there's things like when you go to church and you pray and all the rest of it, and you sing or whatever, it's also your frequency and vibration. So if you're physically doing a practice, you're also building on all the people's knowledge that have done it before and all the people's energy, because we're a collective consciousness. So you're drawing from that. So there's power in that, you know? So that's what you're channeling essentially when you're doing that, in my own opinion. So bringing that forward, but then adapting it to your own personal needs, because this is the thing, isn't it? It's about sovereignty. We talk about that a lot. What sovereignty is taking personal responsibility for your own life, because that's what we're being asked to do. And when we abdicate sovereignty, it's because we're too frightened, we've got too much fear to step into our power and take on that responsibility, essentially, in my opinion, obviously. So I think going forward, we all need to individuate and become more sovereign and see what aligns with us. I mean, Aleister Crowley did a bit of that, didn't he? I mean, I'm not advocating for him because he was an absolute crackpot. But
you're good.
we went and picked bits that works for him. So if you follow the Order of the Golden Dawn, it probably isn't going to perfectly work for you, obviously, because it's based on all sorts of shit as well. But whatever. Quite literally shit sometimes.
Didn't I send you that meme where it was like magic and butt stuff by Aleister Crowley or whatever it was? I mean, but no, keep going. I'm sorry. I just wanted to throw that in.
It was a funny one. Is it funny because it's fucking true? Yeah, butt fucked somebody in the I'm sorry if I'm being a bit gross there, in the desert, and the guy went absolutely crackers, didn't he? And they brought that good in, didn't they? But anyway, we're getting off topic. So yeah, he had the same sort of thing. But what I'm essentially saying is he went and cherry picked all the bits that were aligned to him and then moved them forward. So essentially what we're meant to do is find our own practice, in my own opinion. Because what works for one person isn't going to work for another person. I love Kriya Yoga. I work with energy. I'm all about energy body, blah, blah. I've had a Kundalini awakening. I've had past lives as being a yogi, all that kind of stuff. Whereas Diana, she's not into that. She's into different yoga, you know. And it's just finding what works for you. And as you evolve and your journey unfolds, this is why it's so important to not be attached, because your practices are going to change as well. So I used to meditate 4 hours a day. I could do that now. One, I ain't got the time, and two, I ain't got the patience and all the rest of it. And I'm pretty much in a meditative state a lot of the time anyway, because you just naturally get into that frequency. You'll know, Steve, because you've done it with entheogens, haven't you? So it rewires your brain. So that's the goal, really, is to be in that state all the time. And it's like a flow state, you know, because you're not in the like monkey mind, essentially.
I would completely agree. No, you hit the nail on the head. It's individualizing it and tailoring it to your personal needs and requirements in your personal vision. And that's where I honestly see fundamentalism falling away. I honestly do. I mean, when I had Kirsten on the show, you know, I talked about how the Piscean age is like grasping everybody, like it's holding on. It's like, no, please, like, please don't, no, look back at me. But really, we're like, you know, we're moving forward into this now. And I think what we're going to start to see emerge, I mean, we had Kyle in the audience actually bring up a really good kind of term for it, you know, grassroots spirituality.
Yeah.
You know, and I even called it like a blue collar spirituality too. I mean, that term we've been throwing around because it is, you know, and like, and that's what our whole crew does. You know, we find these ways to break down these complex esoteric topics in this way that the everyday person can understand. And we're starting to see this emergence of this, you know, and it's starting to really burst forth. And like, I honestly think at this rate, we are going to see a lot of people taking on their own personal spiritual evolutions, as opposed to, you know, joining a religion, going to a church, you know, and things like that. But ultimately, like what you said was the individualization. And I want to bring up on that because right now, you know, we have kind of a war. I'm going to get a little complex here. We have two things going on right now. We have individualists and we have collectivists, right? So, and don't get me wrong, like, you know, there are good aspects of collectivism, but when you go really hard into collectivism, you start to negate your own needs and the self. And we know that this on the spiritual evolution, you know, that, so, and you've heard me say this before, sometimes we have to be selfish in order to stay selfless. And what I mean by that is, you know, putting up that boundary and working on ourselves on that individual level. So, because when we do work on ourselves and we do heal ourselves on that individual level, we can be a better service to the collective. We can be more open. We can be more receiving. So I like what you said there about that. That's pretty awesome. And I do want to hop into a couple other topics with you, but you wanted to hear my entheogen story. You brought it up.
Yeah. Go on.
Okay. So I kind of brought it up at the beginning of the show. I had a very strange week in Captiva Island, Florida. So let me set the tone for this real quick. This island's very strange. It has very interesting architecture on it. And unlike anything that I've ever seen before, the vibe there was very interesting too. It was very remote. Let's just put it there that way. So for you guys know, I had my recent 5-MeO DMT experience about a couple weeks back. And one of my plans was, because I do want to start being a facilitator for entheogenic medicine, it's a calling that I feel like I'm kind of meant to do. I decided I was going to facilitate a mushroom experience for my whole family, because they were interested in doing it. So, when I got down there, we picked the date. We said Wednesday, July 2nd. That's going to be the day we're going to do this. So the night came. And this story gets very interesting because there's a lot of ties that kind of go into it that also happened on the island the night of. So before the experience happened, what we had on the island was very strange. We had a lot of low-flying Black Hawk helicopters, which was very bizarre, like tons of them. And they were doing these insanely low flybys all over the island. And I remember I'm sitting there looking, I'm like, what's going on here? What's going on here? Why is this happening? And then also, too, there was definitely a Stargate on that island for sure, somewhere. And the reason why I say that is because it's a confirmed conspiracy that, so mosquitoes are actually a Darvo experiment. So for a lot of people who don't know this, and mosquitoes will collect a DNA from you and bring it to other places. So I have a theory that might have been going on there, because I was getting completely torn up. And it was weird. Like, I got completely torn up the first couple of days and then it went away. But nonetheless, into the experience. So we go to ingest the mushrooms, and I ended up having more than anybody, which as a facilitator, you're not really supposed to do. But, of course, that wasn't on purpose, because when I was going to serve people and I would serve them the amount, it was a low dose, honestly, for them. They only wanted half of it. So I ended up, in my state being like, okay, I just started popping back the amounts that they weren't taking. So, I wasn't even realizing it. And then what proceeded to happen was a very strange and magnificent night. And how it all started to go down. So everything started kicking in. And I remember my brother disappeared for a little bit with his girl, and I remember he ended up going somewhere off with her. I guess we found out what happened later. And I remember I'm sitting there and they're starting to hit me, and I look at my mom, I'm like, you doing okay right now? And she goes, oh yeah, I'm very chill. Right? Like, and that was her word. She's like, I'm just very chill right now. And I was like, okay. And then I remember I was like, do you let's go find my brother. And then my brother ended up showing up, and my brother at first was having a bad trip. So, and I ended up working him out of it, thankfully. So what ended up happening, this is the preface to everything that went down majorly. So I remember, like, he was acting strange, and he wasn't acting right. And I remember because he's a father. My brother has a kid, and with his lady, he's got 3 kids, and he wasn't letting go. He was fighting the experience. And I remember, like, I got to a point where, like, we went up to the sun deck, and shortly after, this is where all the weird stuff starts happening. We get up to the sun deck, and I look at him, and I kind of confront him, and I sit him down. I'm like, bro, what is going on with you right now? What's going on? And I'm starting to even trip even harder at this point as I'm trying to have this conversation with him. And he's like, I'm worried about my kids. I'm worried about the dog. I'm worried about the cats. I'm worried. I'm like, I look at him. I'm like, Ian, listen to me. My brother's name is Ian. I was like, Ian, listen to me. You cannot fight this. You have to let go. The kids are fine. They're downstairs, and they're playing their video games, and they're hanging out. The dog is fine. She's laying out on the deck. She's doing great. And I said, the cats, they're doing fine. They're locked up in the room. Now, you have to let go. You can't keep fighting this, because if you continue to fight this, it's going to be an absolute miserable time for you. And I don't want that for you, bro. And then eventually you could feel his energy release, and you knew he was in a good place. And I was happy. And I was like, all right, cool. But then, thank you, David. I'm actually going to throw that out there. The 963 hertz frequency to snap myself out of a bad trip more than once, it works. Good. All of you people out there who are looking, Hey, Diana, thanks for popping in. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me on with James True. That was cool. But nonetheless, this is where the weird stuff goes. So they end up going back downstairs, and I'm up on the sun deck with my mom. And I'm starting to, at this point, I'm like really like asking myself, how much did I take? Because at this point, because the trip was getting harder and harder and harder. Then all of a sudden, this is where it gets weird. I kid you not, everybody who's listening, the stars literally disappeared out of the sky. And hey, what's up, Raquel? The stars literally disappeared out of the sky. And then what took the place of these stars, they're not eating the dogs or the cat, Michelle. My brother was worried about the dogs and the cats, but and these flying machines took the place of these stars. And I'm like sitting there and I look at my mom and I'm like, are you seeing what I'm seeing right now? And yep, she's there. She's in the chat now. And at first she thought they were planes. And I'm like, no, the airport's too far away for them to be flying in these circles like this. And I said, I'm going to say it is what it is. And eventually what ended up happening after that is I went into my room and I ended up hanging out in there for a little bit. And this is where it all started to go down. I was immediately taken into a higher density. I left my body and I went to this higher density, and there they were, the Elohim. And everything around me in this higher density, like I had the perspective of the house I was in. But it was like a living ship. That's the best way I can describe it. Like this island I was on was a living ship. It was or either we are on some kind of living ship at this point in time, or this living ship intersects with certain locations of this planet, whether they be remote locations or specific locations, especially with water. I don't know. And so what had happened was then too, as I looked into the sky outside of the window that my house in this density, and I saw these gears turning in the sky. Like the sky was made out of these energetic gears of some kind. And I look over at them and they go, are you ready to remember? And I was like, yes. I said, you've been going to my friends and telling them that I need to remember. So I'm ready to remember. And they go, this human civilization, the real humans, they are our descendants. You are a descendant of us. Okay? You are an Elohim, not just in the physical sense, but also in the spiritual sense. It is in your blood. You share this blood with all of the other real humans on this planet. And that's where I came up and I said that a lot of us, the real humans on this planet, we are distantly related to some degree. We share this specific blood, this specific, whether it be both spiritual and physical DNA or one or the other. And they go, this is what you need to remember and integrate into your being, because this is what's going to help you regain control of this ship. And I'm like looking at them the whole time. And as they're saying this to me, I'm sitting there, and the magnitude is what really got me. The magnitude of how I saw it. Like I saw them on how their DNA broke forth from them and went into this planet, and they created us to house them in the physical form. And I saw how the DNA got filtered down through the generations. Like I saw it through the bloodlines, and I saw it through all of this. And at that moment in time, because for those of you who know me here and who have thank you, Michelle, I appreciate it. Have heard me talk about these stories before of my interaction with these entities, who have and I've had many of these different stories with them, but this was, like I said, this one, the magnitude of it all trumped that. And so they were like, I basically asked them, I was like, how do I regain control of this ship? And they said, you know how to do it, by remembering this and embodying it and realizing it. That is how you will regain control of this ship. And I remember when they said that, and I finally realized it. And it was as if a layer of me got peeled off, like a layer of the, when we talk about, we dive into the spiritual things, we talk about Buddhism, and a lot of the meditation, we talk about peeling the layers of the onion. And it was like a layer of that onion that I was just got peeled away. And I'm sitting there and I'm going, this is true. I said, this is now the 7th experience I've had with this exact same group of beings. All right. And I think a lot of it was me fighting it in a lot of ways. Because like, even though you have these experiences, and when you have them, it's like the first one's like, yeah, it's okay, let's put it on the shelf, that was cool, awesome, we'll get back to it later. Then it happens again, and then you're like, okay, well, now we can't put it on the shelf anymore. And then it happens again, and then it happens again, and then it happens again, and then you get to a point where it's like, this has to be true, this has to, at this point, because this is now the 7th time these beings have come to me like this, in this fashion. And now they're giving me the silver platter. They're giving me, because that's something, like I was told you guys, like I'm so passionate. I've been so passionate about human origins. Where did we really come from? We aren't from here. I know we're not now. We came from the source realm. That's where we came from. And we came here, as part of this learning experience. We came here, and we also kind of got a little bit tricked in the process when we came here as well. But we came from the source realms. The humans were created there. At least that's what this was shown to me. And and I'm sitting there, and I remember they look at me, the Elohim look at me, and they smile, and they go, we have a gift for you. And I was like, what's that? And so when I was a child, I used to have these dreams of these ancestor entities that would, and I'm talking about when I was like anywhere from like 3 to 5 years old, I would have these dreams of these ancestor entities, and they would come and like visit me, and they would like tickle me when I was in bed. They would like smile and try to make me laugh and all of that kind of stuff. And lo and behold, they were there. They were there. And I was just like sitting there, and it got really like emotional for me. It still kind of gets like, I'm still getting emotional from it, because they were always so kind to me in these dreams. Like they would come in and they would be like, Peekaboo, like when I was a kid, and I would like laugh, and, they would come up and they would tickle me a little bit. And, they would like, sit on the bed with me, and they would like, like hold my hand and things like that. And, to see them there, they ended up showing up, was kind of like, oh my God, dude. So, and then, to kind of close it out, I ended up dropping back through these densities. And I remember I'm sitting there, and I'm laying in my bed, and then it all hit me. And I was like, I really am a descendant of this race. I am a descendant. I am a very distant descendant of these beings who came here long ago. And I was like, it's true. And as soon as I accepted that, the remembrance came in. And now my life has changed. And of course, you know how I feel about, you know how I am about this. I am never going to put that I'm an angel seed in my profile. I am never going to put, that I'm, or announce like I am BGcast. You're welcome, Don, the angel seed and things like that. But it was almost like a lot of things came full circle for me that night. And it has drastically, Sam, and I mean drastically, changed my reality. And you all know how it's been going. But nonetheless, enough about me. Let's hop back into
No,
you.
I want to ask you some questions. Sorry.
Yeah, yeah,
Been
yeah, yeah. Go
looking
ahead.
on.
Ask me some
Yeah,
questions.
the
Yeah.
podcaster in me coming out. I've only been doing it 2 months. So would you think I'm like still black or something? So my dog, my goodness, Betty. Sorry, my dog is just being so naughty. Gosh, it's all
Hold
going
on.
wrong, Steve. It's all fucking going wrong. Right, what was I going to say? So I've never done mushrooms or anything. As we all know, I'm
Hold
a
on.
prolific.
Hold on 1 second, Sam. This might be my job. Hold on 1 sec.
Go on then. I'll just talk for him because that's what I do. Never stop talking. So I've never done entheogens. So this is the thing that I'm not sure. People obviously that's watching at home that've done them. When you take them, how does it affect the nature of reality? Basically, how would you see it? I mean, because I know Steve said he's had this kind of experience and it's affected his physical reality as well, which seems quite unusual because you think a normal person would have this experience, and then they would have to kind of integrate it, but it wouldn't have an effect on their physical reality. Whereas the thing what's happening is the people that are taking these entheogens, it's opening like neural pathways almost. And I think it's allowing us to tap into like different levels of consciousness. So what I really wanted to ask Steve when he comes back is how he knows the difference. Obviously, because the thing is, because the energies of the earth have changed, so it's becoming lighter and lighter and lighter. And obviously, when things are more lighter, they're not as dense. So I'm wondering if that has a direct correlation on the kind of experiences that people are having, because we're essentially opening up the neural pathways so we can see more of reality, because I believe that's what kind of happens with mushrooms and things of that ilk. And it just allows us to expand our consciousness to a point where we can perceive things that aren't really in physical reality. So that's kind of where I'm interested in taking that. And he's left me hanging. Which is interesting, isn't it? So I need to just keep talking, obviously. So I'm sorry, you're stuck with me and my story. So I've not actually ever taken anything, but I do want to share a bit about what I have done. So those of you that follow me will know I am quite fond of the, party broccoli. I do like to smoke a bit of that occasionally. And I mean, I'm quite open anyway, and I do have a lot of psychic kind of tendencies. So what actually happens is when I do that, I have had what I would say are psychedelic experiences. Sorry,
Sorry
Steve.
about that, guys. Sorry about that. I apologize to everybody. I'm on call and somebody called me for that. So nonetheless, let's get let's get back into it. So one of the things I
Needed
wanted
to ask you a question. Oh, go on. Sorry. No,
yeah,
can I
yeah,
just ask you a question? They
ask
don't
me
want
some
me to do
questions.
it, obviously. Right. So, what
Yeah.
is the difference? I've never taken them. I would just explain to people. I've smoked the happy party. That is, we live that, don't we? And I've had like what I would say psychedelic experiences. We've been tripping. I've seen lights. I've seen all like weird dimensions and all sorts of shit because I'm just open, aren't I? And I was just explaining that my theory is, as we're getting lighter and lighter and lighter in densities, when we're taking these things, it's just expanding our levels of perception. And if you're already kind of open anyway, it's just going to open the doors even further. So what is it actually like? What's the difference? What was the difference between this trip and trips that you've had before? And how do you know the difference between what's just a visual hallucination and what's actually real?
So this is the one thing I will say about entheogens. The experience changes as you do. That's one
Okay.
of the biggest things I'm going to say, because when I first started taking entheogens, when I had my first experience when I was 16, A lot of it, at first, it was just like, it was very external. Like, oh, look at the pretty patterns. Look at the pretty colors, look at how I'm feeling. I feel very happy. And as I started to grow, and of course, as you know, as I became spiritually awakened, what ended up happening was they started to become very internal. They started to go more within, and they started to become very deeply spiritual, I guess you can say. And I didn't really have contact with any kind of extra dimensional entities until I hit my 30s. And at first, I, got to see the machine elves. That was really the first batch of entities I really had an interaction with. And then it started to evolve, and I ended up having a interaction with some trickster entities. And I kind of like, after that, I took their advice, which was the wrong thing to do if you deal with the trickster entity, and it kind of set my life off course. Of course, this was a learning experience. It was a learning experience for me, but it was, and then I kind of swore off entities for a long time, but then these beings came to me in 2022. So how do you know? Well, here's the thing. So what you're experiencing when you ingest an entheogen, it's not a hallucination. It's a very real state of consciousness, but you're only experiencing it temporarily. So you are tapping into a very heightened state of consciousness. And I mean, even if you look at all of the traditional scientific literature on the psychedelic experience, they compare it to states of transcendental meditation. They compare it to states of near-death experiences. They compare it to a very sacred thing. So that's kind of one of the things I want to dismiss. I know you don't feel, you're just asking the question, but a lot of people, even some people in the spiritual community, think that it is a hallucination. And Joey's in here. Hey, Joey, thanks for being here. It's a lot of people think it's a hallucination, or or they think it's not real what they're experiencing, but that's the absolute contrary. It's very real. It's just temporary. So what happens, even from a scientific aspect, if we're going to kind of go with the materialist way of viewing on this, is when you ingest an entheogenic compound, there are areas of your brain that connect that normally aren't connected. You start to utilize more of your brain than you do in your normal state of consciousness. So that's my response to that. It's not a hallucination. It's a very real state of consciousness that you're experiencing. It is just temporary.
Yeah, but right, so this is the thing. You're essentially expanding your awareness, aren't you? And you said it's just a temporary thing. But what you're actually doing is you're rewiring your brain, and you've talked about neuroplasticity. So that's what you're essentially doing. You're making your brain more malleable. So you can capitalize on that. And you can, so this is my thing. I was like, do I take mushrooms and trying to actually learn the guitar? It's a long-standing joke. I've been trying to learn it for years and years. I'm just shit. I'm not dedicated, but I really want to. And it's like, because you can reprogram your brain, but you could also do that in terms of your spiritual evolution. Because what you're essentially doing every time you crack yourself open a little bit, which is what I think is happening with you, you're broadening your perceptions of reality a little bit more. So the chap that you've just been interviewing was talking about that people's perceptions are really limited, and it's expanding it to a point where it's not going to break you. And I think that's what it does. He does it hopefully a bit by bit, or you go a bit crazy, don't you?
One thing I want to say real quick, because I don't mean to butt in, but you're right. It's the major experience is temporary, but there's long-lasting effects. That's what I should say.
Yeah. But then when you compare it to people, because I've never taken anything, like I said, I've smoked the happy lettuce all day long, fucking love it. But I've had lots of experiences throughout my life, and I've not ever taken anything. But what happens is the more you see and the more of reality that you're aware of, it's like you're deprogramming your brain. I think that's what's happening when they talk about neuroplasticity. It's so when I have like a massive download, for instance, I get all this energy, my crown feels absolutely massive, and I start to go just a tiny bit nuts. But Kirsten will just laugh at me. I'm like, oh God, I'm crazy. She's like, oh, she's off again. Because it's like you don't process information in the same way, because your brain has to essentially lose its rigidity to get the download or the information. And if you're taking a lot of that information in, you need to have the bandwidth to process that and to bring it into conscious reality. So it's expanding your awareness. But what it also does is it makes you a bit fucking nuts, because you can't function in the way that you normally do. Because when we're in this 3D reality and we're like cooking the kids' tea or whatever we're doing, you need to be like rigid and regimented. So that's why when you're doing that, you go off, you have your experience, and I have to sometimes bring myself back. So you can do things like puzzles, Sudoku, whatever, do you know, to get you back into that logical brain, because you have to ground it in, or otherwise you're just lost to the void, essentially.
Well, 100%. So I mean, really what happens, the what I will call the permanent everlasting effects of the experience. It does. It almost, so the best way I kind of described it is, you know, we're like these, you know, if we take the Buddhist, the layers of the onion, you peel away the layers of the onion, right? I mean, essentially what the psychedelic experience does, the entheogenic experience does, is it peels away all of those layers, and it shows you and it gives you a glimpse of the true nature of things. Because this is the one thing I always say with people, and this is why, you know, there's a lot of debates in the spiritual community at this point in time about psychedelics. There's some people who think, you know, who absolutely dislike them, think they're a false state of, you know, they're a false state or something like that. There's a guy who was commenting on my ex posts about that. You know, there's people who think they aren't necessary, and I can't disagree with them there. They're not necessary, but thank you, Michelle. I appreciate it. I'm going to get in touch with you after the show for sure. And you know, there's some people who think they aren't necessary, and I can kind of agree with them. They're not, but this is where I come from on it. You know, this is like the ultimate thing. So in the spiritual evolution, while we're here, our ultimate goal is to, as Diana puts it, tame the bull, or, you know, tame the ego. We want to soften it, right? And while when we do that, you know what I mean, we tame and we soften the ego, we still have the blinders of the ego. And, you know, and it takes a long time to truly, and it takes practice to soften that enough to where those blinders get removed. And you can see the raw, unfiltered truth and actually sit in it. But that's exactly what psychedelics do.
Is it the ego, though? Sorry to cut you off. That's the thing. Because, yes, the ego is a container, but I think it's something more than that you're tapping into.
Be more. It could be. It's well. What I'm saying. No, you're all good. What I'm saying is, you know. So let me rephrase it this way. When we're taming the ego, you know, and we're softening our ego in our spiritual evolution, there still is. It might not be the ego. It might be something else. But there still is what I would call our perspective that's on it. It's got our own tailored perspective, right, of what we believe it is, right, and what we think it is, you know. And that's kind of what I was talking about, you know, with James True, was this own, you know, you have this belief, this torque, this belief system that you go off of, that you can access and you can utilize that energy from. So that's, that's basically what I'm kind of getting at. But what entheogens do is they dissolve the ego completely, and they allow you to sit in, at least this might even be a construct as well of mine, I don't know, but in my opinion, it allows you to sit in the raw, unfiltered truth and experience that.
Yeah.
Because entheogens don't care what your beliefs are. They do not. The experience that you have when you undergo an entheogenic or psychedelic experience, it's not going to be tailored to your beliefs. You are going to see and you are going to experience what could very well potentially be the raw, unfiltered truth. And through that experience, at least in my opinion, what can happen from that is you will be able to reformat your ego through this experience. You will be able to reformat it to almost like, we talk about upgrades in the spiritual community, right? Exactly, David. You sit in the raw, unfiltered truth surrounding you, and you get that glimpse, you get that time with that raw, unfiltered truth. And this is why they have the capability of the series healing capability that they do as well, because you are going to be shown your shit. You're going to be shown your shit unfiltered. You're going to be shown all of your inner workings unfiltered. You are going to get a look at the internal you that, at least in my opinion, you're not going to get all the time. So in that way, it's also beneficial as well, because you've heard me say on the show before, we're our own biggest critics and we're our own biggest cheerleaders, right? And so like we sometimes will gravitate unintentionally, in either direction, but it's about finding that balance between being your biggest cheerleader and being your biggest critic.
Yeah.
But the psychedelics are like, fuck that, dude. This is what it is, and you need to take a look at it. and that's basically what happens in the experience. So I think, honestly, in my opinion, I know there's probably a lot of people that are going to disagree with what I have to say. Are they necessary? No.
Look and Steve. It doesn't matter. No, I'm kidding. Go.
No, you're good. What were you going to say? I don't want to be the only one talking. What were you saying? Yeah.
I mean, you do like sound your own voice a bit, don't you? But yeah, sorry. I've come in really to take the piss out of Steve. I've been really well behaved for ages, and it's all coming out now. Yeah, no. What I was going to say was I've totally forgotten. So carry on. I was just saying, fuck them. Doesn't matter what other people think, does it? Because you're in your own experience. So yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, that's just the thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Go on. No, I was going to say, really like what you were on about, because you were talking about essentially the spirit of the plant, and I think that's what can get a bit misconstrued, because people will take them as a party drug or whatever, and from what I've heard, obviously I've not done it, but I have worked with spirits of plants and things before. I've worked with the spirit of cannabis basically, and you build up a rapport with this particular spirit and you work with it. But if you go into it with like the wrong intentions, it will just hand you your ass basically, and that's I think what happens. Yeah.
Well, no, 100%. That's what'll happen too, and like that's the one thing I would tell everybody. Even and here's the thing about LSD. LSD is not completely synthetic. It comes from a natural compound called LSA. It's found in a lot of different plants. Same thing with ketamine. Hey, Jason, sorry, I'm just trying to keep going here, but even ketamine, for instance, like ketamine is found in nature in small amounts, but it's more feasible to lab synthesize it. Same thing with LSD. It comes from LSA. It comes from a natural source, but it goes through a lab. But these compounds have spirits attached to them for sure. They have spiritual energy attached to them. And really how they work is they work off of your level of awareness. And that would be the best way I can put it. So, like, of course, from the newcomer who's taking psychedelics might not have a spiritual connection in them at all just yet. Might not have they might not have, kind of any idea about a spiritual evolution or this compound having a spirit attached to it. So the experience that they're going to have most likely is going to be kind of a light positive one, right? It's like the introduction, but what will happen in that introductory phase is, by default, when you leave that experience, and this has been pretty much everybody I've spoken to who has come out of a psychedelic experience, they start questioning the world and reality, right? So now your awareness, so we know that source consciousness does this to us too. So we can kind of take this model. The more you gain an awareness, the more you're held accountable for, right? So the more you increase in your awareness, of what is going on, and good habits and good actions and alignment practices and things like that, you are held more accountable. So that's kind of the same thing with entheogens, right? As you gain awareness and as you gain this spiritual connection in you, now you are held more accountable by the spirit of the plant. So so if and you've gained the realization that this is a spiritual tool, this is for spiritual exploration, and this is a sacred experience now, you understand this, and you use it in a non-sacred context and you disrespect it, absolutely, you're going to get your ass handed to you. It is. It's like the same thing too. It's like when we send an awareness and we leave a current habit in our lives, like let's say a bad habit in our lives, like whether it be stealing things, whether it be doing hard drugs, whether it be something like that, being, going to brothels, whatever it might be, bad habits in your life, and you get to a point of awareness where that's not the right thing to do, and then you go ahead and go do it. You get the divine backhand, do you not? You get that. It's almost like an instant karma. Almost.
Yeah, it's like a yeah. No, you're absolutely right, because it's the same like when you're on your spiritual path, and it's like any awakening is the path of initiation, basically. And I think even when you're born onto this path, because I think this is all there's points that are predetermined, we're tested the entire, our entire lives were tested in a fashion, and you pass the test, but then you've still got to embody that knowledge, and it's like you're going around the spiral, aren't you? And then you get given the test again, and if you fuck it up, basically, it's like, come on now, you know what you're doing, and you get the ultimate, the instant consequence. Maybe not instant, but it will unfold, and it's to show you that you're not in alignment when you're doing that, and you should know better, isn't it? Really.
It is. It's showing you that, and like that's the best similarity I can kind of put out there, because I had a DMT experience back. I don't drink anymore, but back when I was drinking heavily, and I knew because at that point, I've always heard, like, if you've had alcohol, don't do DMT. If you've had alcohol, don't do DMT. Well, I had alcohol earlier in the day, and I had sobered up, or I thought at enough at that point, and I had made a fresh batch of DMT. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to go in. It's been long enough. Oh boy, was I fucking wrong. Was I fucking wrong. I got my ass handed to me. Like, it was like, the best way I can describe it is I got my ass beat up and down hyperspace. Oh, I did. Like, I literally, it was like I got jumped. Like, and it was just like I was slapped around. I was, thrown through vortexes. I was yelled at, but like in a very kind, loving way. That's like the best. Like, I call it tough, like the toughest love that you have ever experienced, right? And I remember at the end of the experience, the most crazy thing about this experience, I'll tell you, is this. So like when I smoked the DMT, I was on my couch, but at the end of the experience, it was like they dropped me off on my kitchen floor, which was like halfway across my fucking house. And they were like, don't you ever fucking come back here like that again. Do you fucking understand? And I was like, all right, I'm good. I'm good. All right. And then the experience ended up going away. But yes, you will get your ass handed to you. You will.
I like how they just like deposited you in the kitchen floor. It's like,
they're like, drop them off there, but nonetheless, but no, real quick, I want to get into a couple more things with you real quick. So one of the things, and first thing, Sam, I'm really sorry that I got called. I did not mean to cut our show. I want to apologize to you live about that. I'm sorry. I did not know that I was even going to get a call. I'm sorry about that.
it's okay, man. Don't worry about it.
I'm sorry to everybody out there watching too. Yeah. I'm not a fan of the on-call thing. I'm looking to get rid of it, but so one of the biggest things you and I have talked about too in our conversations is a lot of people in our community, they seem to want to shun their humanity. You've heard it before, like, oh, I don't want to be a human being anymore. I want to go back to the higher realms, and or, oh, I only work in the higher centers. I don't pay attention to my lower centers. And, one of the biggest things you and I resonate on is you have to embrace this experience. You have to. And that's part of true ascension. And I think it's one of the biggest tests that we need to pass here is embracing this humanity. So I kind of want to get your take on this, because you had a really good take on it, on how it's part of the integration into ascension by accepting our humanity. So why don't you enlighten everybody on that?
Oh God, I can't remember what I said now. I'll go off piece, but yeah. So I mean, the big thing is your lower chakras are the things that ground you into this reality. So that you've got your base chakra, your chakra even, your sacral, and then your go on, you say the plexus, answer for days.
It's okay. It's okay. Take your time.
Yeah. So basically, they're the ones that you want to work on. And I mean, I was watching an alchemist video the other day about ensoulment and what it means to be an ensouled human being with a divine spark, or coming in from a collective consciousness aspect. So you don't have your divine spark, but you're still here from an oversoul, having this experience in preparation for the next cycle, maybe getting a spark. And they're running from the lower chakras, essentially, is what we call them PCs. So it's your first three chakras, and they're completely unconscious. Now, we're essentially the same if we don't master the first three chakras, basically, because you need to be embodied. You need to be in your body. You need to clear the trauma. And the whole point of the ascension is you're bringing the higher dimensions into meet in the heart. You're building the lower dimensions, which is the physicality. You're mastering that. It's meeting in the middle. And I know, sorry, I've got itchy nose. Well, Diana talks about this Heros Gamos. It's like the merging of the polarities and also the higher and lower aspects. And that's spiritualizing matter, essentially, in the heart center. But you need to be able to be in the body to do it, because the body's a physical, organic computer, essentially. It's the most advanced technology that you'll ever meet, that you'll ever come across. It far surpasses AI. If you can completely get in the body and master that, you can do anything. You can change reality. You could melt walls. It's a process of ascension. That's what we're on, basically. We're on the fast track to spiritualize matter, essentially.
And I completely agree with you. And I think, this is, we see a lot of our biggest tests that kind of like come before us to be like some of the things that we lament, or it's like, and I've always said our greatest victories lie through the parts of you that you are avoiding, and ultimately I think, and we even just with my story, we talked about that being a human being is a very special thing, within us. We have this bloodline that we all potentially share, and we come from this, we are the remnants, the late descendants of this advanced angelic civilization that was here at this time. So, I mean, that's the best thing, you know, like I can say to a lot of people when it comes to that. I mean, of course, they're not going to always take my story and my perspective as, you know, theirs. But, you know, that's the one thing I would kind of lend it to people is understand that being a human is special in and of itself. It's almost like we are these angelic beings, and you know we are these angels with amnesia, and that's kind of the
I
best
like
way I
that.
can. What do you
Yeah,
think?
that's cool.
What are your thoughts on
Yeah,
that? Yeah,
you need it on the mug.
yeah. It is for sure. But no, I wanted to get your take on that because it's something that's important, and you know we see a lot of people out there who are just, you know, negating their humanity. And that's not
Yeah.
the best thing to be doing, guys. And other than that, Sam, one of the other things I want to talk to you about is I want to talk with you about some of your experiences that you've had with missing time. You know, we were kind of talking about that, um, you know, in the chat earlier. And this seems to be kind of a thing. A lot of people who are on their spiritual evolution are experiencing. We're experiencing these periods of missing time. You know, we're normally accompanied with potentially a visit from, you know, interdimensional entities beforehand. I mean, our good friend Don has experienced this. So, Sam, why don't you enlighten everybody here about some of your experiences with this and what they've kind of taught you, you know, and the information that and the remembrances that you've kind of gained from these experiences.
I mean, the missing time in itself, I think like just we had a chat about this, didn't we? I think it's just highlighting that something's happened. That's kind of I think we're allowed to experience that because it brings our attention to something that's out of the ordinary. I mean, my first kind of experiences when I was like 13 or something, I went through this massive period of really, really high strangeness. And I'd get home from school and I'd suddenly feel like absolutely knackered. And I'd lay down on the bed and it'd feel like, you know, I'd just shut my eyes for 2 minutes and I'd like lost 2 hours. I'd be like, oh my God, it's dark outside or whatever. And it's like I was being taken out of my body. I didn't realize it at the time. I did have some out of body experiences when I was around that age as well. And what actually happened is I was just sat on my bed as a teenager. And I just started to float up. I didn't even know it had happened. I got into some kind of like hypnagogic state or something. And I fucking freaked out, Steve. And I was like, oh my God, I'm leaving my body. What the fuck's going on? So I've kind of been doing it on a night anyway, but it was different. But because this was like a conscious thing in like the middle of the day, and I couldn't do it after that, you know. And I'm now in the process of kind of training myself to do it again. But yeah, it totally freaked me out. I was like, oh, and it's like there's that fear now. I think that's what I've got to work through. And I think one of the reasons that I actually want to try magic mushrooms as well is to work through that fear, because I think like you said, it dissolves all those barriers, doesn't it? But yeah, the missing time. I mean, the most recent one. It's just that I don't know, you look like me, but Kirsten, I'm sure she'll mind me telling you this, but she's had like loads of instances where she looks at the clock and then she looks at it again and like a couple of hours have gone. And it's like, where have you gone? You know, where's this time gone? And it's like your brain isn't tracking time properly. I had an instance when I was doing community nursing, so I'd drive around and you generally get an idea of how long a visit's going to take, you know, because you plan your morning out. And I'd done 2 visits, and then I'd gone to like this other patient, and I was like, shit, it's dinner time. And I'd lost like an hour of my day. Couldn't remember how, didn't even know where it had happened. I just remember looking, going, man, what's going on? Like I've lost some time. So it isn't like there's anything specifically attached to it. It's just the experience of missing time. But I mean, you can have things like where you see UFOs, you see that strange phenomenon. You might feel presence of spirit. I mean, recently I had an issue where I was just sat down and it was funny, really. I had all these beings just like materialize in my room, and I was like, hiya, who are you? And they were just like, they told me who they were, and they just went, you know, you need to go lay down, get in bed. I was like, okay. And it just went absolutely crazy, you know. I'd lost I was being dissolved essentially. and there was all these kind of energy things going on, and I was just like, I'm going to check out, I'm going to go to sleep, I can't be dealing with this. And they knew that was going to happen anyway. And then I'd woken up the next day completely disorientated. My crown was wide open, and I've got all this information streaming through me. So it's just strange things like that. You can't predict it. It's just kind of as and when, you know.
I can understand that. No, and it is. I mean, it's an interesting phenomena, especially when we begin to experience it in like the early stages of things. Like you were saying, you said you were like 13 at first when it first started to happen. And I honestly think really what it has to do with is this is something we chose to experience before we came here. You know, I think I joke that, you know, our higher selves are like these badass, like crazy interdimensional bungee jumping mercenaries almost, like that's like the best way I can describe it. But I think really what a lot of people take from it is, though, that they are receiving, you know, this information. They are having these experiences. And one thing I've started to see, I'm sure you've realized about yourself, is when it's after the experience, you start to realize the information and the remembrances that came from it. You know, it's almost like, in the best way, you know, like we were saying, it's like they take this slide of time out of the perspective, the collective perspective of time. And it's almost like either they freeze it or they bring it into a completely different perspective of time altogether. And of course, you know, we're going there in our astral bodies. We're losing, we're having that dissolving of the ego when we kind of undergo that experience. So that's why I think at first, you know, you experience that memory loss. Like you don't exactly remember what happened. You're like, oh my God, excuse me, what happened, you know, with that hour? But then it starts to come to you, almost like it starts to like filter down into you, and you kind of start to like remember these tidbits, and you start to like pick up this information. And I mean, especially in the channelings that you've done too, I'm sure a lot of that has kind of like helped pick up you know, some of these tidbits that you experienced during, you know, this missing time. So but what was I going to say? The last thing I want to ask you is about the channeling. Like, you know, so a lot, you are a very talented one, if you don't mind me saying. And you know, you did. You like, honestly, like when you picked up the one thing that one time, like that blew my mind, because I haven't told anybody about that. The only person who knows about that is like my wife, you know, and like things like that. So but you know, let's kind of give like a little bit of a play-by-play on channeling, you know, and like for people who might be trying to get into it and might be trying to experience it, and, you know, kind of receive this information from these higher densities, like how would somebody begin to tap into this? What is kind of like your own little tried and true method that has kind of given you success in the information that you've uncovered?
Yeah, so I'd probably first say that we're channeling all the time anyway. We're just not aware of it, I think, to varying different degrees. I fell into it, I'm not going to lie. I mean, I watched a guy called Lee Harris a number of years ago, and he was like, oh, if you want to channel, and he kind of gave you some exercises to do. And he said, just basically start writing. So you set your intention to like connect with your higher self and get some information, and it'll feel really strange at first. And you'll probably write something like hello or whatever, random stuff. It'll be lovely, because it always is for me higher self. It'll be a bit flowery, and then you'll notice as you do it more and more, you sort of build this connection. That's the only way I can describe it. And it's like you're opening a channel. You're actually physically opening this connection, and you're moving some of the resistance. I mean, I've wrote tweets and stuff, and I just knew it wasn't me, and that's kind of how I started to get into it. And it's just like you just need to let it flow, essentially. You're getting out of your own way. And then what kind of happened was I had a bit of an energy activation. And I felt the energy come in, and it opened with the Bindu chakra at the back, because that's where it comes through. And because that had been kind of opened even wider, I was allowed to kind of feel more of the energy coming in, and I had more access to that. But I mean, it's going to be different for everybody, but everybody that was spoken to that actually channels like higher dimensional entities, you feel them coming into your back and they're kind of merging with you. And for me, my own personal experience is the closer they get in my head, the more I'm, because obviously it's a symbiotic relationship. It's not just them or you. You're working together basically to bring that information through, and they're working with your own kind of inner lexicon and library of experience, and they have to work through that. That's why like a different channelers we could all be channeling the same stream of information, but they'll get a slightly different take because it's coming through your own inner experience. But yeah, the closer they get, the more out of the way you are. And sometimes it kind of feels like you're in a car, but you're in the back seat. So you're still kind of aware of what's going on, but they're just coming through you. And other times, if you're not wanting them to come in as much, you're like driving and it's like somebody's sat behind you whispering in your ear telling you that information. That's the best way I can describe it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. No, because I agree with you. We are channeling all the time. We are. And it's merely just opening ourselves up to that aspect of ourselves. And the other thing I would say too, to anybody who's interested in getting into this is to understand that the higher densities and the source consciousness itself, it's not always going to communicate in a literal sense. You know what I mean? There's a lot of people on the show have heard me talk about how I feel symbolism is a huge prime language in this reality. When we talk about, a lot of the experiences we have with the divine, a lot of the experiences that we have with the higher densities, a lot of it is beyond words. Words often seem to fall short, when we're trying to describe this stuff, but that's also how the communication occurs. It can happen through feeling. It can happen through symbolism that you see on your own subjective stage. It can happen through it can happen even through a song. It can happen through, the wheels in the sky keep on turning, and things like that. So it can definitely happen through many different avenues. Of course, you will get literal, messages. You will, but also open yourself up to, the possibility that this communication could happen through other avenues. So that's definitely something I want to add. Sam, I freaking still want to apologize about what happened tonight. I'm really sorry. That's the first time something like that has ever happened on this show. And I'm sorry it happened with you. So I do want to extend my apology. I did not mean for that to happen tonight. But I'm going to let you get some sleep. If you have a couple minutes to hang out after the show, let's chat for a second. But nonetheless, I really want to thank you for being here today. I know you're sleep deprived and you need to get some sleep. I appreciate you. Thank you, Joey. Yeah, I got to get off this on-call stuff. It's too much at this point in my life. But I want to thank you for staying up. I know it's late there. And I want to thank you for taking time out of your life to come on the show. I really appreciate you.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thanks for having me. It's always nice to talk to you, Steve.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Sam. So real quick, everybody, I have in the YouTube. Thank you, Don. I appreciate it. Thanks, everybody here. Jason, have a good night. Don, thank you. Joey, thank you. Michelle, thank you. Kyle, thank you. Everybody who is here, giving Sam some love tonight. So I have in the bottom of the description of the YouTube and the Rumble video, both her X profile and the Metaphysical Phat podcast link. And that's something I want all of you guys to do. And as you know, it's pinned at the top of my X profile because I want you guys to check it out. And I want you guys to go follow them. And I want you guys to give them a listen. But if there's anything else you're working on at this point in time, Sam, aside from the Metaphysical Phat, why don't you let everybody know now?
We're actually collabing a bit with Diana from Transcending Ascension, so we're going to be doing a couple of podcasts together in the upcoming couple of months. I'm in the middle of writing a book, but I'm a bit shit, really. It's called The Adventures of Penny Consciously, and it's a bit of a comedy thing with a spiritual twist. So I'll let you know when that's a bit more nailed down. And that's about it, really. I do just want to say, anybody that comes to my X profile, I have got a terrible potty mouth, and I am a bit batshit crazy. So don't expect like normal speech all the time, because that's just not going to happen.
It's all good. We appreciate your potty mouth. It's the realness. It's the realness of it all. And that's the thing too. Like, what does Nick say? Like, if you can't shit post every now and then, you're not a real person. So like, I completely agree with that. And I want to say goodnight to everybody in the chat too. But nonetheless, guys, Sam, if you can just hang out for a couple minutes. Thanks again for joining us for another BGcast Wednesday live podcast. I will be back next week. The nerd in charge, Jen, is making her return, and we are going to be discussing DNA again. This is going to be a little bit more of an interesting conversation, though. And we're going to dive into how actually a lot of us are kind of distantly related. There's definitely a bloodline amongst us, and we're going to dive deep into that next week, Wednesday, 6:30 p.m. Mountain Time. But other than that, guys, please go give Metaphysical Phat a like and a follow for me. Go on, head over to their YouTube. I've been on their show. Diana's been on their show. A lot of the people from the panel have been on their show, and show them some love for me. That's ultimately what I would love for you guys to do tonight. But other than that, thanks again for joining me for another BGcast Wednesday live podcast. I will be back next week, same time. And you know what we say, stay safe, stay free, have that personal sovereignty, but definitely stay away from the Japanese sex robots. Have a good night, everybody. Take care.
Collectively together, you were born to rotate with the crowd. You were born to sync with the sacred spiral. The Hercules stream is proof. The cosmos honors the divergent. BG-Cast brings us that Hercules energy. It's here to save the day. You won't stay lost in the dark. Here is your shot with BG kept beside you. Can we rise alone?